And now, The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA CIB, proud sponsor of the ABSA Africa Financial Markets Index 2025. Good evening. Welcome to the program. I'm Stephen Grootes. 8 minutes after 6 now, the time. Have you changed your shopping habits at all? Pick n Pay had interim results out today. They say their like-for-like sales are up quite strongly. We know the Boxer story, of course, but Pick n Pay stores seem to be doing a lot better than they were. They've had to close some that weren't making a profit. There's been a whole lot going on within Pick n Pay. We'll speak to Sean Summers in just a moment. On the numbers, there does seem to be a big turnaround happening. The loss has been reduced by almost 45%. This is the interim results. But have you actually changed where you are going would really be the question. It's a big ship. It takes a long time. There's a huge amount of momentum behind some of the rivals, particularly as we know the ShopRite story we've discussed again and again here on the Money Show. So just interested if you've changed at all where you shop. You'll speak to Sean Summers in a few moments. David van Wyk, the mining analyst. We'll talk about a comment by Gwede Mantashe, the Mineral and Petroleum Resources Minister. He said that any kind of idea of an export tax on chrome would be a blunt instrument. I mean, he's absolutely right, of course. So much needs to happen if we really want to get our chrome industry, by which I mean smelters, going. And a lot of it is, unfortunately, in electricity. And I see no way of making electricity cheaper for smelters without it costing you. I just don't see a way. This is the ultimate sort of trade-off, which is really what economics is usually about. It is the ultimate trade-off. Talking of Eskom, they do say that they're making progress in reducing load reduction, areas where the network cannot actually provide enough electricity for people living there. We're seeing a lot more of the smart meters coming out. We're also seeing free basic electricity registration. That'll cost Eskom at some point. We'll talk about that with Matthew Cruz. And then off the grey list, as you heard on Friday night, Ismail Momoniat, the National Treasury official who was sort of partly, I think, mainly responsible for that. My own view is a very simple one, is the reason we were able to do it was that all the people involved, all the people making the decisions, everybody wanted us off the grey list. And so there was a lot of working together. It never became a political issue. The moment it would have, and this is, I think, one of the fundamental problems we have in South Africa, is the moment something kind of becomes party versus party, suddenly you find yourself in a very difficult position. And that's really what you need to look out for. I do think that this is a moment where we can find things that we agree on and just push forward on those and sort of deal with the harder stuff, the argumentative stuff, a little bit later. Might just be one way of looking at it. I see over the last week that the Higher Education Minister, Buti Manamela, announced essentially, put in the Government Gazette, that there'll now be new regulations that will recognize what's called higher education institutional types. This, to my mind, is the first step towards private universities offering a degree in South Africa at the moment. If you get any kind of qualification from a private institution, it might call itself a diploma. It might be a degree through UNISA or another institution. You'll hear so many of our higher education institutions have a partnership with a South African university or a foreign university. This would be, let's call it the Santon University, actually having a degree and issuing a degree. Obviously, all of that would be checked. And to my mind, we should have done this years ago. I mean, there are many, many countries where the vast majority of higher education institutions, including universities, are private. You do need some regulation, but surely this is what's going to happen. But here's my question for you. If you've got a child just leaving school, they're in matric, they're just in the middle of their matric exams now, what would be your first prize for them to do next year? Would it be a year off? Would it be going into work immediately? I think many people have no option but that. Would it be sort of going into a university? Would it be going into a university of technology? Where would you like your child to go if it were you, if they finish matric this year? I think a lot of people just want to find a way to get their child into a job, anything to get some income going. I think that's the primary thing. 011 8830 702 021 446 0567 and of course voice notes on 072 702 1702.
The Money Show.
with Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM, streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
And DSTV channel 856.
Well, Pick n Pay announcing it's reduced its interim headline loss by around 45%. It lost just 439 million rand in the 6 months to the end of August. But in the process, it's been able to increase its like-for-like sales by 4.8%. Boxer increased its like-for-like sales by 5.3% and its turnover by nearly 14%. Sean Summers is the CEO of Pick n Pay. Sean, good evening. Good to talk to you on The Money Show. Thanks for the time. You've been very clear all along that returning Pick n Pay to profitability was going to be a long, hard slog. Do you see this 6-month period as an important part in that process?
Good evening, Stephen, and good to be with you again. Certainly we do. It's another step on the journey that we're on. And as I said, with the benefit of hindsight, when we put our plan together some 18 months ago, there is nothing that I would have done fundamentally differently. I think that the levers that we understand that are part of the retail business are the ones that we identified, and they're the ones that we are shifting and maneuvering. Would I like to happen quicker? You sure bet I'd love to happen quicker. But, one's got to be realistic about market constraints and about the realities of where the company found itself and about the journey going ahead. So I'm very comfortable is the wrong word because I'm never comfortable. But I'm happy that we are where we are at this stage.
You've obviously closed some stores, and in fact, if I understood correctly, you finished that process, closing unprofitable stores.
Yeah.
But removing their weight must be quite a big difference. It must make life a lot easier for you.
It certainly does. I mean, running around pouring, I always talk about ROE, the most important metric in business, return on effort, because good effort is always hard to come by. And it takes even more effort to run non-profitable stores than good ones. So getting that out of the way and what have you is good. So we're 95% done with that process. It's obviously been fairly painful. There's been stuff that we've had to do, but that is now done. So that major piece of the project that we looked at is kind of behind us now. And then the other big one was our supply chain. We've dealt with that huge building that we had up in Johannesburg in Eastport. And we've got that done now. We've done a complete supply chain agreement with DP World, and we signed the MOU last Thursday. So that's all done and put to bed. So we certainly are making progress on the fundamental issues that we identified. Obviously, our OPEX structure is something that continues to get worked on day to day, week by week, month by month, because the simple truth is that with all of the stores that we've closed, our like-for-like sales are very good, but we've given up, in the 60 stores that we've closed, we've given up maybe 4 billion of sales, which is a big number. So now the journey is just to make sure that our top-line sales growth is now greater than our expense growth. And that's the journey over the next 12, 18, 24 months.
Talking of expenses, your trading expenses were up by 4.8% above inflation. I mean, what drove them up in that way?
And when you look at your trading expenses, some of these are beyond our control. When you look at the increase in rates and taxes, we've got an unfortunate situation that the various municipalities across the length and breadth of South Africa are just gouging retailers and shopping centres. Some of the rates and taxes we're paying in these areas are just absolutely ludicrous. We've got some areas where we're paying 3 times the amount of rates and taxes that we're actually paying on this base rental. If you look at the cost of power, water, utilities, these are all things. So notwithstanding that Eskom has been running, electricity is damn expensive in this country. So, and those are inflationary pressures that are just way outside of our control. And they're very, very significant.
You were able to keep your internal price inflation at 2.1%. I mean, that must be quite difficult to do given the environment you've just expressed.
Yep, it is. But it's good for the consumer. It shows that our area and our business that we're in is very, very competitive. I just find it rather strange that our leader would now start trying to say that supermarkets are somehow to blame for food inflation in this country. That just, the facts don't bear that out. We're very happy for the consumers that prices are coming down in certain commodities and categories. So if you look at rice and maize, I think that we're going to see further downward pricing there, which is good for our customers because our consumers are really hard pressed.
There have been some suggestions that your suppliers have been helping you keep prices down. Is that true? I mean, obviously you'll have an important relationship with them. The sort of theory was that perhaps they didn't want to end up with just a ShopRite, if you know what I mean. That would be bad for them in the longer run. Have you had a little bit of help from your suppliers to keep prices low?
I wouldn't want to single any suppliers out. We've been doing a lot of work in terms of working with our partners in the business. So obviously, big ones are our suppliers, our landlords, everybody across the piece. So what we have done as a company is that we've focused far more in terms of trading and buying, for a protracted period of time in Pick n Pay. Our buyers almost sort of became collection agents where they were sort of trying to get as much money as possible as opposed to focusing on trading. And that's what we've done now. So we've seen really, really positive outcomes in that regard.
Your clothing section, your clothing stores are growing very quickly. And I find it interesting because the market for lower cost clothing is getting more and more competitive. Everyone talks about Temu and Shein. Do you see yourself as competing with them, or do you see yourselves as more complementary than competitors?
I think, we all live together in the environment. And Shein and Temu are massive today and they are growing. They're growing just massively. But, when you have a look at the work that's been done by Hazel and our clothing team, they really have found favor with the Pick n Pay consumer in terms of what they're putting up, in terms of the product, the feel, the palette, how it looks, and obviously at the pricing points that we're at. And its immediate availability. And if there's a problem, you know where to take it back. There are very, very few problems, but if you do, you know where to take it back. So certainly our clothing is finding strong favor with our customers and continues to do so.
Sean Summers, thank you very much indeed. The CEO at Pick n Pay, really do appreciate your time on the Money Show. And a strong comment from him there, I thought, about municipalities, saying that municipalities are really gouging the supermarket chains, gouging some of the shopping centres. I thought that was very, very interesting. I don't know if you feel in the business that you run, if that's the same experience for you, that in fact you're finding you have to pay so much money to municipalities just to keep running. 011 883 0702 021 446 0567 and 072 702 1702 tonight.
702. Stephen is on the Money Show.
6 to 8 p.m.
A report in Business Live today, the Mineral and Petroleum Minister, Gwede Mantashe, confirming imposing an export tax on chrome ore would not build smelter industry here unless it was part of a much bigger strategy to develop our smelting capacity. Currently, almost all of our smelters have been put on care and maintenance because how high power prices have made them uncompetitive. David van Veek is a mining analyst. He joins us now on the line. David, good evening. Would an export tax on chrome really work, particularly when we have such a big illegal mining problem?
Well, I think that, you put your finger on the illegal mining problem, and chrome is very easily mined. It's close to the surface, and we find in Limpopo, Sekhukhune land and so on, there's massive stripping of chrome from the surface, and it's illegal mining. You see, I think that what would work would be to create, and I've been saying this over and over, create a central buying agency for these minerals so that they can only sell the minerals to you, and then you sell forward into the global market. Chrome and the whole range, we are busy deindustrializing in this country very, very rapidly. You were speaking about smelters and so on, shutting down and so on. Even quotas, the minister said, it's negotiable. We can negotiate over tax or quotas. But what is the use of getting quotas for local smelting and production when your smelting capacity is simply not there because you've allowed your country to become deindustrialized? And the reason why the country is deindustrializing is because our population, although we've got a substantial population, it is too poor to buy manufactured goods. And so we have to export, because there's no local market for manufactured goods. There's a very small fraction of the total population that can afford manufactured goods. So whatever minerals we are having, if we really want those minerals to work for us, we need to actually take control of the flow of those minerals out of the country. And the only way to stop the illegal flow of minerals is through a central buying agency. But the other thing that I found out yesterday, and I've got informants busy informing me, that there's a big smelter on the East Rand, which is actually taking illegal chrome and platinum and gold and so on and processing it. I can't name the name of the smelter because I still need to further investigate it, but we are hot on the trail of that because people keep on saying, well, how does the stuff get out of the country? How does the stuff get out of the country? The stuff gets out of the country through the formal smelters and processors and so on. The formal industry in this country is turning mining into what is happening in Katanga, which is basically scrap formal mining, turn it all into illegal mining, and then just reap the benefit. You just drive your trucks through these areas and let the former bank managers, professors and teachers and so on who sit and break rock next to the road load your trucks with concentrate and ore.
I mean, I presume if there was any export tax on chrome, the immediate thing would be to help the illegal industry because it would just make it so much more expensive and difficult for the formal industry. And I mean, I hear you about a sort of central buyer, but that wouldn't stop illegal mining. Surely it would just continue. It would just go out for export.
No. You see, the thing is that if all the minerals have to go through a central buyer, and the central buyer does not necessarily have to be government. It can be an alliance of government. It can be a private-public partnership between the producers and government to stamp out illegal mining. And so, like we do with the Kimberley process, we then trace every truck of chrome. Where do you come from? Where did you get this chrome from? Where did you load it? Which mine? Where's your registration papers for that mine? Where, in other words, you put a stop somewhere in the chain that you can at that point say, where does this come from and where is it going to? If we are not prepared as a government to begin to impose ourselves as a government, the country is going to become like the Congo. And I've said this 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago already. We're going to become a war-torn, criminal-infested country, which is just absolutely chaotic to operate in, and people will still come here and they will still take the minerals, but they love the chaos, the anarchy, because they can get the minerals so much cheaper when they do.
I mean, for all the talk about a tax here, a policy there, in the end, it seems to all boil down to a lack of state capacity. And that's, I mean, there's you sort of see some maybe improvements, maybe too soon to say. Maybe I'm too optimistic.
Well, Stephen, I'm concerned that people participate in elections, and they win elections. They go into office, but they don't want to do the work that is required once they are in office. I don't care which party is in power. So long as that when they are in power, that minister there gets a competent team of people who are prepared to actually do the work. And, to be frank with you, the Department of Mineral Resources in this country is absolutely chaotic at the moment. Whatever the minister is saying about quotas and tax and whatever, all this language and negotiation and so on, fact of the matter is people are stripping the chrome right in front of our eyes. The police are doing nothing. The government is doing nothing. They go after the guys in the gold mines, the old abandoned gold mines, but they're not stopping the stripping of chrome, Northwest Province, Limpopo Province, Mpumalanga Province, with big trucks and graders and things like that. Those rural areas have been invaded to the dismay of the local population who lose their grazing, their land, their cultivation land, their culture. Everything is destroyed by these people with their trucks who are just coming in and carting off the stuff.
David van Wyk, thank you so much. A mining analyst on The Money Show, 26 minutes after 6.
The Money Show.
The Markets.
Arthur Karras is at the Old Mutual Investment Group. Arthur, good evening. Pick and Pay, still a loss, but a big reduction in the loss at least?
Yes, absolutely. You need to look at it at a few levels. So the key thing that we're interested in here is the trading performance. The line loss also includes the benefits of the rights issue and reducing the debt. But we did see a reduction in the trading losses, and I think that's key. In addition to seeing I think the gross margin needs to go up quite a bit as well. I think if we're going to see a successful turnaround.
First Rand buying 20% of Optasia. It's about to list on the JSE. Obviously they want, I suppose you would say, first dibs on what they think is going to be a big strategic asset for them.
Yes, I think the surprise there is that First Rand is buying 20% from the existing shareholders, and that is in addition to the placement of shares to institutional investors, which is taking place. So effectively, the current shareholders have sold another 20% of the company to a single shareholder, being First Rand, and it kind of gives us some insights into where the big banks are trying to go, because we know there's a lot of changes coming in the payments market, a lot of changes coming in fintech, the way that people borrow money. And I think this is clearly an opportunity that First Rand sees to build up its exposure to that industry.
I wondered almost if they might go for a bigger stake at some point, or if someone else will try and beat them to it.
Well, you're still going to have the existing shareholders are still going to be owning quite a bit of the company. They're not selling out completely. So there will be quite a bit more of the company that will be available to be sold as we go forward. There's obviously going to be a lockup period once we have this listing go through, and I think First Rand indicated that they're also going to be subject to that lockout, so they're not just in this for a bit of a quick profit as the company lists. But this kind of company, as it grows, because it's primarily in the lending business, typically it needs capital. It absorbs capital as it grows and builds out its book. And so there'll be an opportunity, I'm sure, for First Rand and other shareholders to participate in that as the company grows.
A strong day for Naspers and Prosus today, both up, I presume, on the back of what was happening in Asia earlier today.
Yes, so a strong day for Tencent, and Naspers just piggybacking on the back of that as we mark that to market through our listings here. And I think all of that really on the back of what appears to be a bit of an easing of the trade war between the US and China as Trump makes his way across Asia and is on his way to meet with the Chinese leadership.
I mean, that had an impact that seemed to have brought down the gold price. And obviously, if peace breaks out in terms of a non-trade war, if I can call it that, between the US and China, the markets will really welcome that. That's probably why American markets are up tonight too.
I think that's part of it. I think the biggest story behind the gold price going up over the last while has been more about the debasement of currencies. People are concerned about the ultimate value of their US investments, their US bond investments, their US dollar investments. If we see a more pliant Federal Reserve that cuts interest rates and does the kind of thing that the president wants them to do, rather than doing the right thing for the economy as a whole, I think that concerns people, that you might go through a period of higher inflation and not having the kind of confidence in the dollar. So I think that hasn't gone away. That's still going to stay there. But if we add to that the US government shutdown, the trade wars, those are all things that are contributing to the gold price. So with maybe less of a trade war, then you have a little bit less momentum for the gold price in the shorter term.
Arthur Karras, thanks very much indeed. Portfolio Manager at Macro Solutions at the Old Mutual Investment Group. Bringing the time to 6:30.
WhatsApp Stephen
on 072
702
1702.
Well, lots going on tonight. You heard the conversation with Sean Summers from Pick n Pay. It does seem to be a major change. I mean, as he said, firstly, fascinated by what he said about councils. Just literally, I think the word he used was gouging because of the costs that they impose on shopping centres, on supermarkets. And you can just imagine councils that are desperate for money, that they'll see you coming, if you know what I mean. And we know that electricity inflation has been so much higher than real inflation over the last few years. That was one aspect. The other, which I'm fascinated by, I think we're about to see real change in our higher education institutions. They're essentially being there will be a way for a private university to operate, confer degrees. They can't do that at the moment. I do think that's going to lead to a big change. And that then takes you to one of my questions tonight for you on 072 702 1702 for voice notes. What do you believe? What would be the best thing for a young person to do in the year after school? I must say, I'm always a bit nervous about gap years, and I do worry that it's much harder to get back into kind of education later. So if they can, if they're able, if you have the money, I would try and push them into education as quickly as I can. That would be the way I would encourage them. You can't tell an 18-year-old what to do, unfortunately. But I'm sure that you have a strong view. And what did you do in your first year after school? And did it work out for you? 011 883 0702 021 446 0567. What did I do in my first year after school? I went to university. What did I really spend my time doing? I met a community radio station.
702.
702.
Stephen is on X.
At Stephen Grootes.
Well, it's a 7 the time. We've been talking about electricity already in the show. Sean Summers and his comment, speaking as the CEO of Pick and Pay, that municipalities are essentially gouging, I think was the word he used, supermarkets and shopping malls. And in the meantime, you'll know that we don't really have load shedding anymore, but there's still load reduction. Millions of people having their power switched off for 4 hours at a time because the network doesn't have enough capacity to distribute electricity. Matthew Cruz is the energy expert at Empower. Matthew, good evening. Eskom is trying to solve this in quite a few interesting ways. One of them is through smart meters, and essentially, I presume this means they'll measure how much power you use and when you use it. Is that really going to be effective? I mean, this does require a very comprehensive approach, which Eskom is trying.
Hello, thank you very much on the show. Yes, sir, I do think the approach is a good one in terms of how to go about determining where the overload is happening on their grid. Their reasoning for doing the load reduction of 4 hours at a time is that certain substations are getting overloaded, and primarily through electricity theft, as reported by Eskom. So it affects about 20% of the customer base, and about 1.7 million people at the moment experience this load reduction. And the way that they are kind of going about this is both a stick and a carrot. So they've put together a carrot that is in the form of the expanded free basic electricity access. And this looks like 50 kilowatts per month is given for free to households. About 2.1 million households qualify for this, but only about a quarter of that actually currently claiming the benefits. So they're coming along with that carrot of like, oh, if you allow us to come in and put smart meters, it's kind of like they're saying allow, but they're actually just rolling it out. So they're saying we're coming to put smart meters in. But when we do, you'll get a 50 kilowatt initial amount. It's free. I personally think it should go up to about 300 kilowatts, and I think quite a few other energy experts in the energy sector also aligned with that. And when they put a smart meter in, then they'll be able to stop this thing called electricity theft, because they'll be able to see immediately what they mean by smart is that it's connected to the internet in a real-time basis. So every second you get feedback from your meter. You'll be able to see immediately when it goes to zero, which means basically the person is most likely disconnected their connection and rerouted it. So they're going to roll out these smart meters and at their own expense, and then that will address electricity theft and then also help them better manage the system on their side.
Okay, so I mean, because I was going to say, to try and stop electricity theft is really the hard part. I mean, that kind of live monitoring is the only way to do it. I mean, I hate to say this, but I mean, people are desperate not to pay for electricity because it is so expensive. I do worry that someone will still find a workaround around that. I mean, the incentive is absolutely there.
Yeah, so we heard in your commentary previously that the municipalities are gouging the retail centers and shopping malls. So my company, Empower, we personally install on the roofs of shopping malls, and we see up to 12 Rand per kilowatt hour is being charged in the peak hours. So there is an aspect of the price of electricity is continuing to increase, and there's something that's going to be addressed about this from Eskom themselves, where they're starting to also roll out their own solar. They're terming them distributed energy resources. Over the next 5 years, they're going to be putting down 250 sites around the different areas that are experiencing load reduction. And this then will actually reduce Eskom's own cost of serving those clients, as solar is about half the cost of coal. So they're going to bring down their own cost of like supply to these customers, which will then, we hope, will decrease the electricity increases, the price increases that continue going forward. I use the word hope there almost cynically because unfortunately we see year on year Eskom continue to ask for more revenue. They don't seem to come in like a story that, oh, we've conducted a full audit now, and we've noticed that these corrupt contracts that were, they mentioned state capture for the first time ever in their last financial report. We've cancelled these corrupt contracts. Now we've, found out that there's been a whole bunch of inefficient spending. While they recognize those things, they don't come with actually reduced revenue targets every year. They just continue increasing the revenue targets. And one wonders, in that context of other companies and mines and our companies, we help reducing their use of Eskom and then going through this death spiral of people leaving the grid, and about 9% of their total demand is reduced over the last 10 years. Like, where are they going to get this additional revenue that they keep on asking for? So it's kind of a catch-22 where they're like saying, we're going to try and bring down the price of electricity, but one wonders, how are you going to do that? And it remains to be seen how that actually happens.
And I mean, along with that, the free basic electricity access, I get the carrot part, and it'll help Eskom get more revenue, but they still have to pay for it somehow.
Yeah. So that's like another 1.5 million customers that are each getting 50 kilowatts each. So that's a whole bunch of, free electricity they're giving away. And so they're going to be looking, unfortunately, to the businesses and the people that are currently paying for electricity to pay that. And we also saw that their adjustments to the tariffs for households kind of benefited people that are using lots of electricity, and kind of really had a hard impact, up to a 25% increase on houses that are already using less electricity and are being electricity efficient. So it's almost like kind of punish the middle class that is already suffering, and punish the people that are paying for electricity already, like tax those more that are paying tax already, kind of thing. Seems to be the approach that is taking place at the moment.
Matthew Cruz, thanks very much indeed. Energy expert at Empower. Your experience of living in a load reduction area, please. 072 702 1702.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa CIB, proud sponsor of the Absa Africa Financial Markets Index 2025.
7 minutes now to 7 the time. Well, you heard the confirmation on Friday evening, South Africa being removed from the Financial Action Task Force greylist. It follows concerted action by regulators, government and the private sector. Some laws had to be changed. There had to be sort of proof that we are prepared to mount prosecutions of financial crimes. Basically, it's all about monitoring financial transactions. Ismail Momoniat has played many roles at the National Treasury. He's currently a technical advisor who is working on this. Ismail, good evening. I should probably say congratulations, actually. We were able to get off the grey list in just 3 years. Why do you think we were able to do it so quickly? What made us get our act together so well?
No, evening, Stephen, and I read your article earlier this afternoon. I think, we worked as a team, and I think, like you say, everyone was committed to getting off. And, people worked hard, so I must compliment the entire team. We had people from the Hawks, from the NPA, from the FIC, from Department of Justice, and all the financial sector regulators, non-financial ones. So it worked really well. It was tough, and yes, we did it in about, just under 3 years. Which, by the way, many at FATF on Friday actually were surprised by the speed with which we did it, even though they gave us 2 years to do it. But they understood with our action plan of 22 items, it was going to be tough.
I mean, is there stuff we need to do now to keep ourselves off the grey list or to improve our regime?
So, Stephen, look, the issue with grey listing is, we got there because our institutions were weakened. And in 2019, the new leaderships that had come into place were really not, obviously it was too little time to do much. And so we shouldn't be surprised we got grey listed. But having come out of grey listing, we also shouldn't get the wrong message. It's basically saying that we've begun to do the things we're supposed to do. So, for example, investigations and prosecutions of financial crime, of corruption, etc., that we've begun to do it. We still have huge problems, as with, let's say, the Tembisa Hospital story. Aside from getting the actual hitman, those that have looted the system continue to be free, even if they've had their assets forfeited, but that's after 4 years. And this is the problem. We take too long to act. And we've got to act more speedily and more effectively, because that's why we failed mutual evaluation, aside from the gaps in our legal framework, and that's no longer a problem. We are, in fact, better than most countries on that score, but it's a typical disease in South Africa. When it gets to implementation, we are really, really challenged. And And like you say, somehow we as South Africans, we perform well when FIFA was watching us, and even someone as dishonorable as Sepp Blatter was kind of watching us and threatening us to take the World Cup away. That got us going. The stadiums were built in time. And I think similarly, FATF played that role here to get us going. But we need to mature up and do these things for ourselves because, it's our country and it's in our interest to do so.
So there was a great national effort. It worked. In a cryptocurrency world, does it matter nearly as much? Isn't the world about to change fundamentally in terms of international financial transactions anyway?
Look, it is changing, what I didn't complete what you fully answered your question. The worst thing we can do now is to become complacent. We need to continue to improve, to strengthen, and in fact, as it happens, and I think it's probably a good thing, that next year we face a mutual evaluation, and in 2027, and so they're going to watch the progress in the last year. And so what progress have we made since the mutual evaluation? That is now your baseline. And if we can't demonstrate that we've really continued to improve, we could get back into the grey list, and we certainly don't want to go there. So it's going to be important that we continue to move from strength to strength. And then issues like crypto, the new mutual evaluation is done in terms of a new methodology, their fifth round methodology, which kind of expects us to act on crypto. That wasn't the case in 2019 as much, but now we will be assessed to what extent and how do we regulate the crypto service providers.
There is an argument that there's too much monitoring, that the regulation is too onerous. I don't know if you saw the piece from Professor Brian Benfield in Business Live a few weeks ago. He said that FICA and the Know Your Customer legislation is too onerous. I presume you disagree with all of that? You would say we do need monitoring of financial transactions in the way we have it now?
Look, the Free Market Foundation finds everything too onerous. But I do agree with them that it is onerous. But look, it's a system we have, and I don't quite agree with everything, the way the FATF methodology. I think in many cases it's over the top, and yes, it is the biggest cost to financial services, but it's a system. If we don't comply, we're going to get into the grey list. So it's almost like we have little choice. That's the way the world has come to expect banks to operate. It is a bit over the top, and it is very expensive, but we're going to just have to comply with that.
Ismail Momoniat, really appreciate the time. Thank you very much indeed. Technical advisor at the National Treasury, former Director General there, of course, and one of the people, the prime movers in getting us off the grey list. Ismail, thank you very much indeed. And I think I can say congratulations, played a very big role in that. We will talk the private sector and railways in just a moment. I have this dream one day of being able to go in quite a nice train. I don't need a Rovos. I don't need a blue train. I don't need silverware, cutlery. I just need a nice train to go from Messina to Cape Town. I'm happy to change trains in Joburg if you like. I'm happy to spend some time at Park Station. I'm happy to go and, I don't know, visit my house or something. But the idea of just traveling across the entire country from the heat of Messina down through the escarpment into the Karoo and then through to Cape Town is something I really want to do on a train. And I'd quite like to do it at speed. We'll talk about that in a moment. Good evening at 7 o'clock.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA CIB, proud sponsor of the ABSA Africa Financial Markets Index 2025.
And now, The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
7 minutes after 7. Good evening. I'm Stephen Grootes. Plenty coming up in the next little while. We'll speak more about transport and particularly railways and the private sector. Barbara Creasy, the Transport Minister, talking about that yesterday. Our business book review, Malema, Money, Power, Patronage, Mika Reddy and Poli van Wyk. Some of the stories that have come out of that book around Julius Malema and money, leader of the EFF, of course, are just astounding. One of the questions I'll ask Poli van Wyk is what response she's had from Malema around this. I've heard nothing from him. I know for various reasons he may not choose to reply, but the way, as she details it, the way in which patronage works, it's astonishing. And then the question I've never got to, and never got a satisfactory answer, or one that I found satisfactory, let me just sort of keep it to my own opinion, is why it is that the NPA has never launched prosecutions against Malema for what happened with On Point, which goes back many years, was an engineering firm in Limpopo that Malema was involved in that received all sorts of contracts. A very interesting story. We'll speak to Polly van Wyk there. And then from 7:30, looking forward to speaking to Karis Nafta. She is currently a pet custody mediator, but her main job, her main career has been in dog training, animal handling, and what that's like. And I know so many people who say, I took my dogs for training and it really worked. I know one or two who say it didn't. I was talking to one over the weekend who told me the story because his dog misbehaved. He was told to go with the dog and sit under the naughty tree. He tells me he wasn't doing that, so he left. I was like, okay. He said he hadn't been bad, his dog had been bad. So he wasn't going to sit under the naughty tree with his dog, so they left. I think the dog was probably badly behaved for quite some time afterwards, but I thought that was quite funny. Good to hear from you tonight on 011 883 0702 021 446 0567 and voice notes tonight on 072 702 1702.
WhatsApp Stephen
On 072
702
1702.
Voice notes coming through, comments coming through. Len saying, I would urge a newly minted matriculant to go to university or come to university, says Len, and do a BCom General for the first year, register for economics, maths, stats, IT, computer science, com law 1, and entrepreneurship and business economics. That would equip a candidate to think and apply knowledge in a structured and logical approach. In fact, Len says, I'm in Hyde Park. I'm currently a lecturer at various business schools, lecturing business studies. Other people talking about this. Paolo asking, it's an important question, Paolo. I'm confused. Gibbs and Henley Business School are both private and have MBAs. So that's a degree. My understanding, Paolo, is that they do that through other institutions. So Henley, I think, does it through Henley in the UK. Gibbs, the Gordon Institute of Business Science, does it through the University of Pretoria. What the change is, what it would allow, is that, the Sandton University would be able to start and hand out degrees in the name of Sandton University. That would be the change. Other voice notes coming through tonight, particularly around electricity.
Hi, good evening, Steve. I live in a load reduction area, and currently we have been load reducted. And so we have received smart meters, and I think the electricity is way much expensive now, especially with the price increase that came into effect. We do not get basic free electricity in our neighborhood. So they promised us that once we get smart meters, the load reduction would come to an end. But lo and behold, we still have load reduction. So I don't know what it means that once we get the smart meters, the load reduction will go away.
Hi, Stephen and team. Converse to the romantic appeal of luxury train travel, I would love to give you guys an insight into the coach road travel in South Africa, which is very supported and very popular, and which I recently used to travel from Johannesburg to Cape Town and back.
I mean, I have, in my time, I was a university student, used both the railways and the coaches, the buses. In the end, I preferred the train, even though it took a lot longer. I mean, in those days, I was in Makanda, Grahamstown then. You would go from Alice through to Joburg, and that would take about 20 hours or so. A bus would take about 16, I think. I mean, if you drive from Makanda to Joburg, it's about 10 hours. So if you do it on a coach, it did take longer, and on a train, longer still. But the train was just more fun. And I was a university student. And what did you think I did with the time?
702. Stephen is on The Money Show.
6 to 8 p.m.
Well, let's talk about trains, because confirmation yesterday from the Transport Minister, Barbara Creecy, they want the private sector to invest in our passenger transport railway system. It would include the development of rapid transport links between major cities. And this brings back the idea of a sort of high-speed rail line between some cities and maybe even one day from Messina to Joburg, for example. Professor Jan Havengaar is a logistics professor at Stellenbosch University and director of the GAIN Group. Jan, good to talk to you again. Thank you for your time. We've seen the private sector slowly getting more and more involved in our railway system, mainly on the cargo side. This seems like another significant step. Jan Havengaar, we're battling to hear you. Can you hear us? Or it would seem that we're just going to see if we can deal with that call and just see if we can get Jan Havengaar back just to have this conversation. We do see it as an important conversation. As you know, the issues around railways and transport, we have seen big developments there over the last little while. I do think one of the important questions, of course, is how much of a role the private sector will play. And then it comes down to a rate of return as well. They will want to do this for profit, so we do want to improve that. All right, Jan Havengaar, the professor, back with us. Jan, sorry about that. Is this another significant step in the sort of private sector getting involved in our railway sector?
Yes, it is a significant step. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Absolutely significant step. And I was just beginning to say, if you talk about slowly, less than 4 years ago, we didn't even have a rail policy in this country. So a lot has been achieved on the freight side. It's going to take time. But on the passenger side, yes, this is a significant step. You know, and I think the significance here is not so much about high speed between Durban and Johannesburg. I wouldn't call it a red herring. You know, there's about 2 million to 3 million passenger journeys on flights between those two cities. The minister is tracing 600 million passenger journeys, and it's mostly, and she's very clear about it as well, it's more poor people getting them to work. It's mobilizing our workforce. That is the most important thing that we need to do, and it's a thing that we need to focus on. So number one priority is to sort out our metro system. And there's significant progress. I mean, we did 650, 700 million journeys about 20 years ago. That dropped to 10 million journeys. Metro journeys a few years ago. It's now up to 80. But her target is 600, and that's mostly in the metro system. That is mostly, I've spoken about it before, an average person in India, where I've often worked, pay less than 10% of their monthly salary on commuting. In South Africa, it can be something like 50 to 60%. That's the important thing that we need to fix. Once we've got that fixed, and she announced a few programs around that yesterday as well. You know, in order to get a metro system to work, you need trains. And we have this beautiful blue train sets, more than enough of them. That's being built at Springs. They're really high quality. The second thing, you need signaling, and she's asked for help with that. And then you need maintenance depots for those train sets. And she's asked for help with that. And I think that is the important thing that I want to focus on. The next step would be to connect cities, and I think there it's more important places like Polokwane, Pretoria, Gauteng, where people that, if I can call it that, is less affluent, and where they currently take taxis and buses, where you can get them in trains, where there's enough density. There's not enough density between Durban and Johannesburg. I've looked, 2 million passengers per year. It's about 10 trains per direction per day. It's like 3 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon, maybe 1 or 2 during the day. That's not where the solution lies. But she does it in the right way, the way that she's done with freight. She says, I'm going to ask the nation, you come back and tell me what you think. That's what I've done on the freight side. And at the same time, she's also announced the fact that she's busy with a rail master plan. I think in her wisdom, she will bring those two things together. A rail master plan developed by a lot of specialists, together with the way in which the nation and businesses respond to a request, and she'll get to the conclusion about how to solve this, which is it's a proper way to do it.
So Jan, we might be losing you on that line, but how far do you think the role of the private sector in passenger rail will go? In cargo, the idea is that private trains will run on government-owned railway tracks. It's not going to go that far with passengers, at least not for the moment.
I don't think with the metro system as such. It's more of an integrated type of system, and I don't think that's exactly how it works, but with elements of the system. So that's the maintenance depots for the trains. That can be privatized. There's no reason why not. Even the signaling system, There's elements of that can also be privatized. And if you think about the freight side, it's not only running trains on government-owned track. It's also concessioning of the infrastructure maintenance the same way that Sunroll does it. It's also part of the solution where the private sector can get involved, and I think will get involved eventually. And the same thing on the passenger side. Then, as far as the more regional type of trains is concerned, yes, there's no reason why that cannot be private sector trains. I just don't think it will be as significant as the 600 million train journeys that we see in the metro system that we want in the 5 years' time.
Professor Jan Havenega, a lot more to ask you, but that line beginning to give up on us. Thank you very much indeed. Logistics professor at the University of Stellenbosch, director of GAIN Group. So, I mean, we've known for a long time that it really is about the short train journeys to and from work that people need. And if you sort that out, if you make a big difference there, the unbelievable improvement in the quality of life for millions of people around South Africa would be absolutely huge. And you all know the one organization that's going to oppose this, which of course is the minibus taxi industry. They'll deny that, of course, but that would be the one organization, I think, that would stand to lose out. 19 minutes after 7.
The Money Show.
Business books.
Well, one of the books that's really been talked about at the moment is the book about Julius Malema. It's not really about him. It's about his money. It's called Malema, Money, Power, Patronage. It's written by Mika Reddy and Polly van Wyk. Polly van Wyk is the author and investigative journalist. Polly, good evening. Good to talk to you again. It's been a while. You say that Malema has a large amount of money. We know some of the scandals. We remember your reporting on VBS, of course. There was the situation at On Point Engineering in Limpopo many years ago. What are the sort of main sources of Malema's money?
Good evening, and thanks for having me. So Malema is having trouble to initiate his own businesses without unlawful money. So all of it mostly comes from tenders. And when you talk about On Point, which was a company in Limpopo in 2010, then we're talking specifically about Limpopo government money. So it really, and all the scandals that we elaborate on in the book, explains how he and the EFF has fleeced the Metro, so he's fleeced in the early days the Limpopo government, how VBS Mutual Bank has been a part of his honeypot, and how he is not stopping.
Wasn't the Premier of Limpopo at the time Castle Matale? Isn't he now the Deputy Minister of Police?
Yes, I'm happy that you say that, because it's one of the points that we need to make. Apart from you saying that it's not a story about Malema, but about his money, it's also not a story only about Malema. It's a story about South Africa, where, as you just rightly said, Castle Matale is now in a very powerful position where he was part of and very much a suspect in the On Point Limpopo tender scandal. The Hawks never investigated that strand of the investigation successfully. The NPA never pushed it through the courts, and now he's the Deputy Minister of Police, holding a lot of power.
Why did the NPA never investigate On Point? I mean, I remember, my memory has a day where the trial was supposed to start. Malema's co-accused was ill, so the trial didn't start on that day. His co-accused is still with us, and I understand healthy, and the trial never restarted.
Yeah, exactly. So the NPA had a investigation from the Hawks, which they took to the courts. One of the investigations fell through and landed in court, and the people were found not guilty. It's one of some of Malema's funders, and the courts, especially in that case, I think it's important to note, said that the puzzle pieces appears as if there's definitely something wrong, but the Hawks could not prove their case. And that was sort of what happened in the next case as well. It was poorly, now we can say it was poorly investigated. All the puzzle pieces were not there, and the NPA at the time, then when the judge threw out the case, the NPA just never reinstated the 51 charges against Malema of money laundering, fraud, corruption, and racketeering.
Okay, so Malema, we remember, as leader of the ANC Youth League, then formed the EFF. And yet, as a political party, the high water point of it got the high water mark, was that it was the third biggest party in the country. And yet, as you say, there's a patronage network around him. How does that work? I mean, for example, a contractor in, I don't know, Joburg or maybe another metro. How does it end up, from what you say, that money ends up with Malema?
So there's many different ways, but the usual pattern would be something like a tender gets advertised. There's some sort of political influence that redirects tenders towards friends or family of Malema. Money would flow through a certain number of companies until the company that's linked to Malema gets paid by either a department or a related company. And then there's a few examples of what may happen. Either Malema receives boxes and envelopes full of cash. Sometimes his properties are paid for, his fleet of cars are paid for, or money flows to bank accounts linked to him. So either his own slush funds or way back in the day when he wasn't as smart, it was Ratanang Family Trust, a bank account directly linked to him.
And this would be in return for a tender. So even though he hasn't been in the biggest party in the country for a long time, he still was influencing tenders then.
Yes, absolutely. So we see that from the very start in the Limpopo days, where Malema has always had outsized influence in the political sphere in that he operates. So along with, and that's why I think it's important again to take us back to Castle Matale's influence, where Castle Matale and people around Matale and Julius Malema were so powerful and that they could redirect and realign tenders moving to fraudulently. And this we can say because the public protector, Thuli Madonsela at the time, found that the on-point tender was fraudulently given to the company. So often fraudulent tenders were given to these companies, and there were some instances where it came to light that his cousins, for example, received big tenders, where or at other stages where he phoned some of the treasurers or the politicians, the people who pushed the pay button in the department, and sort of, vociferously vocated for the young people who needed to be paid. And some of those young people would always turn out to be either his cousins or his friends.
Where is SARS in all of this? I mean, we've seen them turn against Lucky Montana recently, or take action against him. Clearly they will be tracking this income?
Yes, so SARS did look at his income and found it an astounding almost 30 million rand flowing to Malema between 2005 and 2012. So that triggered a rather large investigation termed Project Caesar into Malema, and his cohort at the time. And that's where Malema's first problems with SARS started, because there was a lot of money going to Ratanang Family Trust and to himself and to his properties and his fleet of cars. So recently, there's, of course, the VBS matter, there's the matter of the metros, and we know that Malema lives far beyond his means. What's happening at the moment with SARS is not quite clear. We understand from sources that SARS investigators are looking at Malema and, of course, Floyd Shivambu. But Malema, it's important to understand, has grown smarter. So it's smarter and wealthier and more influential. So there's always people who are willing to either assist him with paying some of his SARS fees, or people who would help him hide the money more efficiently, or he just became much more smart in terms of the lawyering around it. So at the moment, what's happening with him and SARS is not in the public arena.
Polly, you've written an entire book making a series of very serious claims against an important politician in South Africa, a politician who has a constituency. I'm presuming you offered him the right of reply in all of this? I mean, it's serious claims that you make.
Yes, it is. So there's many instances where we quote him himself, especially in the On Point case. We had the privilege of having his court documents where he where he described his own narrative and his own defense. So in the VBS matter, the same thing. In different cases, we went to him for his opinion. The same way there was a Mazotti mine in Limpopo where Malema and Mazotti apparently had a talk to, and Malema recalled some of the EFF people who were protesting at the mine. And the same thing with the metros, where where the EFF and Malema fleeced some of the metros. So in all of those instances, we did ask him for his comment. We did not tell him that it would be collated later into a book. So based on legal advice, we didn't mention that it's a book that's to be written.
Okay, so you quote his side of the story, essentially.
Yeah, quite extensively, actually.
Polly van Wyk, thank you very much indeed. Investigative journalist, co-author of the book Malema, Money, Power, Patronage.
The Money Show. How I make my money.
23 minutes now to 8 the time. Normally, at this time, you hear from someone who's made their living about dealing with people in some way, shape or form, whether they're a CEO or an activist or someone who works in radio or TV or an influencer or whatever it is. It's someone who works with people. Karis Nafter has made her money, her career, essentially through dealing with animals. Currently, a pet custody mediator, but has a long career before that in working with animals and in particular in training dogs. And she joins us now. Karis, good evening, and thanks so much for agreeing to spend half an hour with us on My Money on The Money Show.
Thanks for having me, Stephen. I'm very happy to be here.
Almost anyone I've ever spoken to who works with animals professionally has told me that it started when they were young, that it started when they were kids. Was it like that with you?
Definitely. The story when I grew up was that my first word was dog before I even said mom. You know, that might be the family myth, but that certainly stuck around. And so I have my whole life been obsessed with animals. And interestingly for me, what fueled this was that I wasn't allowed a dog when I was a child. And partly this was because my parents, they didn't actually really want a dog themselves. And to their credit, because I think this is a mistake a lot of parents make, they didn't just give me a dog because they figured they'd end up taking care of it. So by not getting a dog the moment I wanted one, it fueled this desire to learn everything I could about dogs and start a dog walking business when I was 10 years old and keep this obsession going until I did get a dog when I was a teenager, and I have been working with them ever since.
And it's just dogs for you, hey? You're not a big fan of cats?
No, that is not true, actually. I have 3 cats right now and 3 dogs. I love all animals. I have worked in my career with horses, cats, wild animals, worked on movie sets with all kinds of things. So my primary love, it's fair to say my primary love is dogs, but equally I think cats are absolutely fabulous. So I love them also. Okay, and parrots.
So you're talking to someone who has 2 dogs and 3 cats, but that's because I have a teenage daughter and all the rest. But you really can't train a cat, surely now.
You can train a cat, Stephen. You just have to be very patient. You have to convince the cat it's their idea, and then you can train a cat. Any living animal can learn, right? Training is essentially learning that you are managing in a clever way. So you definitely can train cats. However, dogs are uniquely sort of bred to want to follow instructions. You know, we as human beings were creating this species to live with us, we selectively bred the animals that kind of got a kick out of working for us. So, you know, people, when I help them with like their border collie, for example, they'll say like, I think my dog has obsessive compulsive disorder. And I'll say, no, they don't. Or maybe they do, but that's how they're supposed to be, because they have been bred to want to repeat an action over and over involving a person. So that's what makes dogs so easy. And you just have to be with cats. It takes a special skill.
I have a dog that likes to do the same thing over and over, and it doesn't involve people so much as it involves a ball.
Yes.
When you finished school, and obviously you wanted to get into the animal economy, were there a lot of options? I mean, most people, if they think of getting into the animal economy, think, well, I have to be a vet. But when you were finishing school, perhaps the pet economy, if I can call it that, was beginning to really take off.
It was. I was in a very interesting position because I began working with dogs in the mid-90s. So I've been at this for almost about 30 years now. So I left, as soon as I left school, I started working full time at a dog training school. I knew that I wanted to work with dogs. And I was in a really fantastic, lucky position. One of those happy accidents where I met someone who knew someone, and I ended up working with some incredibly talented experts in the field of how do you train dogs? How do you change dogs' behavior in a way that it can work better for the people around them? How do you teach dogs, tricks so you, like I said, you can work with them on movie sets? And what was interesting for my particular story was that I was part of the team. I worked for the people who opened up the very first doggy daycare in the state of Oregon. So at the time, there were no other doggy daycares. And some of the trainers I worked with had this idea. And, people told us we were crazy. Like no one would ever send their dog to a daycare. That's the stupidest idea we've ever heard. So we'll get to that in my current job also. That's kind of been the story of my life. But we knew it would work. We knew there was a need for it. We opened it up. And of course, our doors were, our business was full in about a month after we'd opened. So I have always been quite lucky in seeing what's needed around animals and people, and being willing to put myself out there, even in new and uncomfortable places. Even for me, moving from America to Cape Town was new and uncomfortable, but there was a real need for people who were working in the dog behavior space to help people, because wherever there's dogs and people, there's problems. So yes, I make my money with animals, but the truth is it's the people who call me. It's the people who follow my instructions or don't. So my work really, honestly, Stephen, I'll tell you a secret that everybody can hear. The dogs are the easy part of my work. Okay. The hard part of my work, whether it's as a mediator or as a dog behaviorist, is the people in the picture, because we human beings are a lot more stubborn than dogs, I must tell you.
So, I think there's a famous story. I can't remember who wrote it, but it's called What the Dog Trainers Saw. I think it's Malcolm Gladwell, actually, who basically talks about how the humans react, and it's the humans that make the dogs fight, because the humans don't like each other. The humans get tense. And I was going to ask you, just like teachers always tell me that their customers aren't the children, it's the parents, clearly for you it's the same thing. It's the humans that you've generally got to manage.
Absolutely. Dogs are just being dogs. So when dogs chase other dogs, or they bark, or they, pee in the wrong place, or chase a squirrel, none of these are wrong. But in the wrong circumstance, none of those behaviors are wrong, but in the wrong circumstance, or in the wrong place, or at the wrong time, can be very troublesome for people. My work is to help people understand, first of all, why is the dog doing what it's doing? So they have a little bit of understanding about it. And then it's too simplistic to say it's the owner's fault. But the circumstances in which the animal finds itself to that situation happening. So for example, I learned the hard way many years ago when I am interviewing a client who's having let's say their dog is a little bit aggressive, or anything you could think of. And I have to go through a very detailed interview process. And I used to ask people, do you walk your dog? And everyone said, oh, yes, of course we walk the dog. And then I realized I had to get a little more specific to say, how often do you walk your dog? Because very often people would say things like, well, we walk our dog every single Sunday, without fail. The dog just gets one walk a week. And situations like that of not exercising a dog enough will lead to a dog. It's kind of like having a petrol tank with petrol in it, and you light a match to that and they're going to explode, not because they're bad, but because they haven't had the proper outlets for their energy. So you could blame the owners, but that's just not helpful and won't do anything. But we have to understand that the lack of exercise in this example will lead to potentially aggression, or a dog becoming unmanageable.
Have you ever been dealing with a dog or met a dog and actually worried that this was going to be quite a dangerous encounter? Some dogs, I know some people are very scared of dogs, and I understand that. And especially if you're not used to them, or especially if the only dogs you've met have been quite difficult or quite fierce. But have you ever met a dog where you've actually thought, this is quite a dangerous animal? And there've been, you will know the horrific stories we've heard about some of the breeds of dog that have a terrible track record, particularly when it comes to attacking children.
No one's ever asked me that question, Stephen. That is such a great question. And the answer is absolutely. I've been scared of dogs. Oh my gosh. I mean, I think anyone in my position who has not met a dog they're scared of is naive or not doing their job very well. So I've been in situations where I've driven to people's houses and was unable to get out of the car, but had to sort of do the session by rolling my car window down and talking to the owners that way.
Wow.
So absolutely, I have encountered dogs that I have been very scared of, and rightly so. The power breeds and not necessarily some of the big power breeds. Any strong dog, any physically strong dog can be a dangerous dog. And what you have to understand when working with any dog, doesn't matter if it's a Chihuahua or a Doberman or anything in between, any dog can bite you in the right circumstance or the wrong circumstance. If they're scared, if they feel threatened, if they feel threatened in their safety, any dog has the potential for biting. But many dogs can display aggressive behavior if it worked for them in the past. In other words, let's say they're not very comfortable with people and that dog learned through trial and error to snap and growl. That will keep a person away. And then that behavior becomes established for that dog because it works for them. So yes, I've definitely been, unfortunately been bitten more times than I care to think about. But every time I've been bitten, it's been my fault. I haven't been paying attention. I mostly haven't been paying close enough attention to a situation. And every time I've learned from it. And I've never, ever blamed a dog.
There'll be some dogs who, I grew up with dogs. I have dogs now. And I kind of hope that I'll always have a dog somewhere. And I want to think that every dog deserves a chance, particularly because we as humans have created them and molded them into the animals they are now. To an extent, they've probably done that to us too, but that's a story for another conversation. Are there some dogs that you think are actually too aggressive, that actually they will always constitute a danger?
That's I think for some dogs, there is potentially a chance to rehabilitate them, but the reality is there are not people that are able to do it. So I have sometimes in situations where I work at animal shelters, for example, and I do with rescue dogs. There are some dogs where is, in my opinion, kinder to let a dog be put to sleep than kept alive in a small cage for the rest of its life. And some people will have very strong opinions about that and think otherwise. But when there is a dog that, and it's, like I said, it's never the dog's fault, but it is the reality that they cannot be trusted around people, where they have a long and established bite history, where we know that should this dog get out of the yard, it will likely bite a child because it has in the past. Then for those dogs, it isn't always realistic that they can be out of a shelter. And it's often for many of them, even if it's maybe not a question of it being an incredibly serious, aggressive situation, I do have clients where they have to face the reality that their dog cannot be in public. It has to stay in the yard. And that's the best life that dog is going to have. So you have to be realistic with every dog. It is my first job, I feel, with my human clients and my dog clients is to be honest. And it doesn't mean I'm always right, but I can only be honest from my experience of things if I think something is fixable. One of the biggest challenges when it comes to, certain breeds of dogs or even certain rescue dogs is unless you have experience with the intensity that some dogs can have, people can be very naive when they, from a very good place in their heart, want to adopt a dog, assuming that if they really love the dog a lot, it will be okay. And that is the biggest mistake that happens because it doesn't work. You have to go into situations with your eyes wide open if you are going to have a powerful dog with the potential to do destructive with that power.
We're speaking to Karis Nafta, the pet custody mediator, someone who's been working with animals and particularly dogs her entire working life. She's our My Money guest on The Money Show tonight. 9 minutes now to 8 o'clock.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA CIB, proud sponsor of the ABSA Africa Financial Markets Index 2025.
Talking, of course, to Karis Nafta, the pet custody mediator, someone who's worked with dogs her entire life and other animals as well. Karis, when I was growing up, there was a famous advert that said all a dog needs was this particular food and something with Vitagen. Now, if you go into a pet store, you'll find that all a dog needs is a fluffy bed and a fan at night and a chewy toy and a special treat. And my own worst thing, doggy ice cream, honestly. How much is too much? There are times when I think, really, come on, these are dogs. These are animals. They're not human beings. They're not people, and they're not children.
I hear you. They're absolutely not. And there's a lot of clever marketers out there, aren't there? So to answer your question, though, in all seriousness, people often forget what it is that dogs do need to be happy. And instead, they want their dog to be happy from a people point of view, or people want their dog to enjoy the same activities they do. So even things like when I talk to people about their dogs, they say, oh yeah, we go out with my dog. We always go to the coffee shop. And it's like, well, that's not fun for your dog. I mean, it's kind of fun, but they don't want to do that. They want to run and they want to sniff. So when it comes to the dogs, there are wonderful things and puzzles and ways to entertain your dog where they get to use their mouth and that are very good for keeping their brains busy and happy. So there are wonderful toys that have become much more sophisticated in recent times that you can get really great stuff for. But what people forget is that a good toy doesn't replace good exercise. And that is really what makes your dog happy. So this is, of course, depends on the age of the dog, the breed, their temperament and everything. But every dog, really what they need every day is to get really, really tired, appropriate again for their age, going outside and moving their legs and sniffing and doing the things that come totally naturally to dogs, which is foraging in the ground, barking at other dogs, sniffing other dogs. That is where they get their big joy from. The toys and the things, some dogs absolutely love them. Retrievers certainly, dogs that want to put toys in their mouth, that want to put something in their mouth. Even if you don't have a dead duck, you can buy them a stuffed duck and that'll make them quite happy. So you have to look at each dog individually. What are they actually into? What are they actually having? What do they naturally gravitate toward? But don't assume that just because it's an expensive dog toy that your dog is going to love it.
You're now in a space where you call yourself a pet custody mediator, and this is about when couples split up, so the humans have stopped talking to each other, what happens to the animals, and particularly the dogs. And my sense is that a dog will absolutely know what's going on in a home and will sense the sort of vibe and be affected by that.
Well, they will certainly sense the vibe, but they would have no concept of what's going on. So what dogs will react to is their people reacting in a different and unusual way. And dogs will react to owner's stress either by avoiding that person. So some dogs are really troubled by stressed out people. And some dogs naturally gravitate toward people. They want to help and they want to, bring you a toy to make you feel better. And so it depends on the individual character of the dog to know how they'll react to the stress that the owner is going through, or the owners, let's say. But this is I started talking about opening up a daycare and, that was a crazy idea. And this work now, just for a quick statistic, every 2 minutes in the United States, a new divorce is filed. And more than 60% of those divorces have an animal in the picture. And so the question is, what do you do? Who keeps the dog? What do you do, or who keeps the cat with that situation in such a way that we are, as you alluded to earlier, that we're not humanizing the dogs. We cannot pretend that a dog is a child that should be treated like a child in a divorce situation. That isn't really loving a dog. That's imagining a dog to be something not, probably to fill our own needs. but that isn't loving them. So the work that I do is really based on bringing my experience of animal psychology and dog behavior into the space of divorce mediation so that we are not humanizing, toddlerizing our dogs, which ends up causing them a lot of stress in the long run.
Do you find people fight over their dogs? They have literally a custody battle?
Absolutely. Enormous custody battles. Enormous. The dogs can represent so much in terms of, imagine there's an infidelity, let's say in a marriage, and a betrayal, and then you add a dog onto that picture, and well, you betrayed me, therefore you can't have the dog, or you ruined my life, you can't have the dog too. So the dogs become very symbolic for a lot of people. It becomes a great way to hurt your ex. If let's say your ex is the one who really loves the animal, and we've all heard stories of how the absolute worst of people can come out during a divorce. And so animals are uniquely positioned to unfortunately be used in that sense to weaponize the situation even further, which is also where I come in to try to bring some common sense reality into the situation so that we're being kind to the animal even though the people are hurting.
We've got 10 seconds left, but Gareth, that must be a tough thing to do because people are in the middle of a dispute will do anything.
What's prepared me for this dog job is working with all the aggressive dogs over the years. I figure if I can break up a dog fight, no, that's fine. It's only half a joke, but it's a very hard job, but it's a very necessary job. And I feel really very privileged every time I do it.
Karis Nafta, thank you very much indeed. Pet custody mediator, been involved in the pet economy, as you've heard, with dogs and cats and horses and parrots for a very long time. Karis, I really enjoyed that. Thank you very much indeed.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA CIB, proud sponsor of the ABSA Africa Financial Markets Index 2025.
Well, U.S. markets looking up tonight ahead of the meeting between Trump and Xi tomorrow. The Dow Jones up nearly 0.5%. The Nasdaq up 1 2/3%, and the S&P 500 up 0.99%. We'll be back with the Money Show tomorrow. Good evening. It's 8 o'clock.